Hi everyone, you've probably been unlucky enough to meet me already. My name is Quinn and I've designed this course for you guys. I hope you enjoy it. We've got a contributor who's also from the local area. Tara did once live in Wollongong area. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and where did you go to uni, Tara?
I went to the University of Wollongong.
You went to the University of Wollongong?
I started at Wollongong University College. I'm not sure if they still have that.
They still do. That's where I started too.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah.
Because I was a high school dropout. So it was an avenue to go back to study. It was a fantastic avenue. I was at the Sydney campus. And yeah, it was a great experience.
It's a great experience. And did you start to think about writing as a career at Wollongong at that point, or had you thought about it earlier?
Since I was about 15, 16, I'd started to get interested in poetry and really start reading novels and when I did look into study, I recently spoke to an old tutor that I had, and she said, I remember you really wanted to be a journalist and wanted to do something special in the world and blah, 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 blah. And I'd kind of forgotten about that, but yeah, in my mind I thought, okay, I want to do writing, I'm interested in literature, but the avenue to sort of turn that into money, the only avenue in my mind I thought was to follow the journalism path. And so, yeah.
So do you
originally it was journalism, sorry to interrupt.
Do you think that tutor helped you to discover other things that you would like to write about, or did you just take a different organic kind of pathway at that point?
The Wollongong University College was a really organic environment. It was a bit more relaxed. I think a lot like this program would be. Mm-hmm. I mean, she she encouraged my interest in journalism. She let me open a campus newsletter for the students. Wow. Sydney campus was a lot of students from overseas. So, sort of had that tilt to the newsletter. And yeah, but I think sort of the first teacher to really encourage me to sort of discover or investigate for myself what the power of what literature could be for me, for my life, was originally was a high school teacher, and he introduced me to Robert Frost. Right. My first sort of foray into poetry, and it was The Yellow Wood, which is really famous and probably on a Hallmark card somewhere. But it really the line "Two roads diverged in the Yellow Wood." It really inspired me to sort of find my own path. And I actually, a few weeks after being introduced to poem, dropped out of high school. Yeah. Yeah. It was my
it was
path.
It was emancipatory. Did you feel freed by the poem?
Completely. It really, honestly changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah,
that's amazing. Because it just reminded me what you said there so much of famous Irish poet Seamus Heaney that just died at the end of last year, and the singer Gary Lightbody out of now it's going to disappear from my mind.
Don't worry, I don't know who Gary Lightbody
is. Anyway, he just did this wonderful little piece to camera, and he said, kind of very disaffected youth going to school, on the way out the door, and then someone handed him a Seamus Heaney book of pro or novel, poems and stuff like that, and there's also a little bit of Heaney prose too. And he just suddenly found this connection with the world that he actually lived in. Yeah. Was a way into finding a different way of looking at it. There were aspects to the world that he lived in that he hadn't seen articulated in quite the same way before, and brought out there. So, in your experience with writing, do you find an anchor in the world that you live in and work away from that? Is that kind of how you write? From my experience of reading what you've written, it seems to be anchored in your own world a little bit.
In my own world, as in where I'm from?
Yeah.
With the first novel, it was all about like finding a sense of who I was, and sort of reeling like the fishing line back to that point, to that age where the character and I could reflect back on that age as myself.
Sure.
The protagonist and the age of myself, where I was. It's like you build your story of yourself. It's called, psychologists call it the reminiscence bump, and it's between the ages of 9 and, say, like 29 or 9 and 30. And it's basically a time of experience where all those experiences become the story you tell yourself, that you are your story life.
Sure.
You understand? And so definitely in Spoiler, the anchor was from that kind of period of around 9.
Yep.
Characters' early memories, the recollection that the character goes back to mid-teens or later teens, and the process of working out who that person is and who that person is in preparation for the next stage, which is adulthood.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in that way, it was so important to for the character and for the novel to look at the coast and look at the geography and look at the culture in the local area and look at family and this heavy importance in family, and look at these secrets and lost stories, and try and desperately, like you do when you're a teenager, to find some sense of identity and some sense of self in all the little bits put together. It might be friendships and social circles and all those things, but I think it differs between people where they try and find that sense of identity. I think with fractured families, children from fractured families, sometimes you kind of pull on strings that are further back. So yeah, all those. That anchor was, yes, Wollongong. I grew up in Woonona, just on the border of the Lambie, in a little housing commission strip, as did May, the protagonist in Spoiler. And many of the experiences came from real life, and many from imaginations, the process of making fiction.
Yeah, melding them together into fiction, really, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah,
I think that's sort of common with first novels.
Do you find that stories themselves can be mentoring kind of vehicles?
Sure, definitely. Yeah. Novels have been that for me. Albert Camus' The Outsider. Poems, songs, works of art, films. I think they're more, there's sort of, they're more moments.
Yep.
And there's moments and there's mentors, I think. I think they're two, and they're both necessary in our lives, both necessary in sort of working out what motivates us. We ask that of characters, but we need to ask it of ourselves too. You ask that of a character when you're creating, okay, what is this character motivated by? Are they motivated by love or success, fame, family? What is it that drives this character? What do they want? What are they motivated before what they want? And it's the same we ask of ourselves, what motivates us? Like, what resonates with us? What's truly resonating with us to lead us where we need to go?
I know particularly with my own undergraduate degree, I was very much anchored in that kind of researching stuff that was important to me, and that it was very first person in that sense, even though, I mean, we're told in university that you've got to be objective and you've got to approach material in these kind of ways. I don't think any of us really would be doing the work that is involved in that investigative process and research process if we weren't motivated by some kind of inner passion, or at least some kind of idea of, there's a first person experience here that I want to get out there.
Right.
And I at least want to get out there for other people. Did that change then when you did later writing? And can you talk about how you went about developing subjects and themes in your later writing?
Did it change in my later writing? I'm hoping it is still changing. I feel like I'm still at the complete beginning of my career. And I'm like old, I'm 30, which is a bit silly. To teenagers, I'm definitely old. But no, I feel like I'm constantly researching. I think as when you're a writer, I'm trying to compare writing to academia, but I'm just going to speak from a writer's perspective.
Yep.
Because I'm going to confuse the two and assume and get it completely wrong. But I think as a writer, your life is your interest, your life is your research. And I've tried to, I think in a way, I've purposely tried to change up my life a lot to keep sort of that, to keep my perspective, to keep my interest, to keep my research sort of sharp, to keep learning, and to keep developing my perception of what it is to be human, what it is to be a society, what it is to be a community, what it is to have a relationship, all those things. So the answer is, the question was, has it changed?
Has it changed, yeah.
And the answer is, I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope it's reflected through my work, that I'm growing up, that I'm maturing, that I'm learning the craft more. Not just the craft of writing and of English usage and fiction and essay writing on the side, but of the craft of knowing
where to begin with it.
Not just where to begin with it, but that comes from knowing characters, like knowing life, knowing humans, knowing the heart, like knowing the motivation of people, learning more about the world around me. Like, it's all research, and by saying that, that's where to begin, is just by listening like a thief.
So to build on that idea, Tara, we've talked a little bit about formal and informal mentoring, and you said that some of the back narratives and stuff that you grew up with as a child were things that inspired you to learn more, and in some ways those people probably mentoring you, perhaps even unconsciously. At various points they were mentoring you, and I am aware now that I've been mentored unconsciously loads of times in my life, So how different is the approach of your experience of being consciously mentored in the RELX International Mentoring Program?
I think with mentoring, I think there can be two types of mentors informally. Ones that are, I think both are inspirational. I think there's ones that are successful and ones that are definitely at the other spectrum, that are inspiring mentors that kind of hold like, okay, so I think a purpose of a mentor is to hold a mirror to you, not a mirror of praise or vanity, but just a mirror to you of truth. It's reflected back on yourself.
Yep.
And when you meet someone that presents the truth of you to yourself, that's, when you meet them, it's like it's an arousal, you can feel it. And I think the ones that aren't successful, those people who come into your life and say, look, this is the truth, this is the truth, this is what happened to me, and it's so easily possible for you. You could go this wrong way. those mentors should stay in your life briefly. They should just bump you back onto a road where you're getting to the top of the mountain. You understand? And there's not one path. There's the Chinese proverb, there's many paths to the top of the mountain. It's true. There's not just one path. There's not just finish high school, get the best score. I can't even remember. It's not SAT score, it's HSC score. Get the best score at school.
I think they call it ATAR now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get straight into university.
You're probably all very aware of your ATAR scores at the moment, folks, but don't worry about it too much.
I mean, it's a path, and it's a completely legitimate path, but it's just important to remember that it's not the only one. You know?
Mm. So how long did you spend with your
mentor?
mentor?
There was more to that idea was going to university and blah, 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 blah.
How long did you spend with your mentor?
With my formal mentor?
With your formal mentor?
We spent, under the mentorship, about 18 months, roughly. Yes. And formally, under contract, it was 1 year.
Yep.
And that was being physically in the same area, actually staying in the same house in Nigeria. We stayed in the same house. And then also going across from New York to LA, visiting each other, and also being on other sides of the world. So it wasn't just about one-to-one mentoring. It was emails, it was phone calls, it was even sort of silence and just being given a reading list or, for months on end.
Sometimes mentoring in silence is the best thing mentors can do.
I think so.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, I've got some experience in mentoring within the program that we've designed, and I've done a little bit of it now. The thing that I'm now starting to do a bit of tutoring and a bit of subject coordination. The thing that really worked for the students that we first brought in last year, and it's kind of interesting that you've gotten to this place from the way that I think about it, or the way that I thought about that course was developed. You've talked a little bit about that process of coming from school to a different understanding of how this works, and I find, because I've got children at school age now, I find that schools are quite process orientated, if you like. It seems to be very focused on teaching children about the process of
the formula to go from A to B.
And then when you change that learning environment, you can continue at university to learn about processes if you like, but it seems to me, from my perspective, it seems to me that you're learning about substance a little bit more. And processes are fine, we all rely on them, but if the process is a little bit disconnected from the substance, it's not fulfilling in the same way.
Right.
And I think a lot of students find that in their first year, when they've gone into university and they're finding, I thought I was going to have this great career in this particular direction. As you said, I thought I was going to be a journalist. But the process of finding something a little bit more substantive, something more generative, more inside you is often the thing that I find to be something that mentors can help you a lot with. Quite often, as a student, you tend to talk around the subject in the first few times because you just don't have that grip on getting close to it. And I think mentors are really a cool way of doing that sometimes. Did your mentor help you get a better grip? Did they help you hold on to the substantive part of you that's pushing you out to be right?
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. So when I was at university, I didn't study literature. I studied Indigenous studies. And arts. It was the beginning of a BA.
Yep.
And under my mentorship, I was a few years into my career as a writer.
So Tara, you found that you wanted to do something else at uni. So can you tell us about the Rolex International mentorship that you got once you were already a working author?
Yes, I can tell you. At the time, I wasn't actually in university. Or if I was doing one subject at Wollongong University, which was French.
Yep.
And basically my life trajectory.
Yes, your life trajectory.
My life trajectory was that I was working as a writer. I was writing pieces in The Good Weekend. I don't know if you still have that in Australia.
We do.
Things like that.
Yep.
Griffith Review, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Etc. etc. And I basically was nominated by Julia Lee, who's a novelist in Australia, and she made a film for Cannes a couple of years ago.
Yep.
And she was also previously mentored under this program, the Rolex Mentor and Protege Arts Initiative.
Wow, that's a mouthful too.
Yeah, that is a mouthful. By Toni Morrison.
Yes.
In previous years, actually the first round that it started. So what it is, it's an arts initiative, and every 2 years, Rolex sponsors mentors. It's actually the biggest mentor program in the world.
Wow.
In terms of like financial and scope and geography and arts covered and everything. So they cover 6 art forms: literature, music, dance, theatre.
Yep.
I'm going to miss 2.
That's okay.
But you understand.
There's a list.
And it was completely random, and I didn't know Julia Lee beforehand, my nominator.
Yep.
And then there's like a process of scouting, and then finally a protege was, a shortlist was selected, and we all travelled to Nigeria, meeting 3 Americans, and met with our potential mentor for 10 days, and talked about our sort of what we were doing with our lives. Some of the other potential proteges were, into master's degrees, had written books, poetry books, or an academic at Brown University. So, and I was just working on writing at the time, and sort of worked out how this mentorship would match, and sort of which person would fit well.
Yes.
Wally Soyinka was the mentor, who's a Nobel laureate, Nobel Prize winner for literature, and he didn't finish university, and I think that's actually where we connected.
Sure.
I know this is aimed at university students, but there's value in going to university and learning that it might not be the right thing, but actually turning up, there's value in turning up and giving it giving it that, see how I lose my language? Giving it your,
best effort?
That's the word.
Yes.
By the way, we're in Paris, France. I've been here for 3 years, and I'm living in the countryside where no one speaks English, so I don't get to practice English very often. You can leave that in.
I'm quite happy to.
Anyway, so it was about finding that perfect fit between mentor and protege, and we really connected over both not completing university,
Sure.
but going on to have sort of careers and interests, and still learning and researching, even if we weren't in the academia structure.
Sure.
So over 18 months, we spent time together, and I learnt more during this mentorship than I had in all my life, especially all my schooling life. I was introduced to, and I don't know how I missed this at school, but I was introduced to Shakespeare and Greek mythology and things I hadn't actually read before, and ideas about life, and I mean, we lived in Nigeria. I went with my daughter, she was 2 at the time, her first school was in Nigeria, so she learned things about life too. But my whole scope of understanding what the world was cracked that little bit more, and that's life, isn't it? It just if you're
opening up the cracks.
you know, you're reading, you're researching in the way you interact with people, and not being told that this is what's interesting and this is what's current and this is what you should look at, but sort of sweeping your eyes around the room and really learning what resonates with you, what's important to you, what are you interested in, not what the crowd is. The
maddening crowd or the market. Or,
yeah.
Because we're all encouraged to marketise our work, aren't we? You know?
Or like, this is popular, vampires, you should write about that. Or whatever it is at the time, you know?
Yeah, and I'm not a Twilight fan myself.
I don't know why I said vampires. Because we're staring at a movie, you know? Maybe it was in my subconscious. Anyway, my world cracked open, and I think that's beginning in high school, like 16, I dropped out of high school, and all those years, and I could write a list of the names of the people, and I could probably pinpoint the month of those moments and those mentors who shifted my life and brought me. Sometimes I came back to university at various times, and led me on different paths. It was so crucial and so important to not just like say coming to an age where you're in your late 20s or in your early 30s and saying I'm satisfied, but where you're in the right place.
Yep.
You know, and it's the right place for you, and you can feel it as you're being nudged by these mentors in these moments that you're following your bliss. I wanted to ask you, Sean, how you saw mentoring within academia to be similar or different from mentors in the arts, and that relationship between mentor and protege, or mentor and mentee.
Yep. So I've got a little bit of experience mentoring outside of academia, because I come from a construction background and I've had lots of apprentices on the way.
Yeah.
So I was always kind of thinking about how am I going to allow this fairly abstract thing that I'm talking to this person about, how am I going to create a way that makes sense for them? And that's it's kind of interesting, because in construction-wise, it's shape, it's geometry, it's all that kind of stuff. In academia, though, it's conceptual most of the time. I often found that the idea was to, once again, find something in that person's trajectory that gives them a grip on the idea. The first year that I did this program, one of the great fun things as the head tutor or whatever in the program was to turn around to the entire group of kids on their first day in there and say, I'm never going to mark a report card, I'm never going to judge you morally, I'm never going to talk to your parents. This is about you. And I think mentoring is very much a process of allowing the mentee. That's my experience in mentoring, allowing the mentee to come into it.
Yep, and to sort of control what and sort of help guide you as a mentor in what they need. Yeah. Yeah,
that's what I thought. And as I've got a few years under my belt with this now, I've got a few graduating students who are my first mentees who come back, and they've started off doing psychology or something like that, but they've really gone into a not a completely different area. They're still focused around that, but they're using their own backgrounds or whatever to work, to move into social work and to do things like that. Several of the young guys have become teachers now. That they had other ambitions in the first place, but they've certainly gone into being teachers.
I think the difference between being mentored and being a mentor is you just have more, I think, for myself, I had more compassion, or I hoped that I had more compassion, but it's when you're sort of young and kind of like searching for what am I supposed to do, like what am I going to fulfill, like what's my motivation, again back to this, because I think that really you need to know what your motivation is before you're making any choices, or when you're taking your turn, or when you're applying for something, whatever it is, you have to know what's my motivation. Like, is this really true? Doing some scholarship in London or whatever it is, like, is this really going to lead to that self-satisfaction, that satiate is the word?
Yeah, that's a nice word, isn't it?
What?
I like it.
Yeah.
Satiated. Am I going to be sated? Yeah.
Sated?
Sated, yeah.
Am I going to be sated, like, in my soul?
Is it fulfilling? Yeah.
So I think as a mentor, I just had to remember that I had those questions and that unknowing, and I still have it. You know, I'm still learning to be human, and you just, I think you just become more relatable. You understand that this person has the potential, this mentor has the potential to really help me, or inspire me, or show me something that I haven't seen before. That's from something. But no, I think by becoming a mentor, maybe as soon as you go to university or in second year or third year, I think it's fantastic if you can assist like a high school student that is really fearful and perhaps the first person in their family to ever go to university, and so don't have a older sibling or don't have a parent to guide them or to support them or to understand.
Just that place to go, isn't it?
To have someone, to have someone. Yeah, I always was, as a young person, I was so lost. No one studied at university. My parents didn't go to university. My brother didn't go to university. I felt like, who's there? I really did, and it came to me later in life and at different points, but I really needed it. I really wanted it bad, and that poem was at that moment. Yep. And it led me to people. I went to India, and I went around Australia as a 17-year-old sitting in a tent. I mean, and I did meet people that weren't exactly mentors, but moments that guided me.
Yep.
It's so important. Mentors play such an important role in our lives. They really do. Not just within academia, not just as an artist, but everyone as humans. It's really like such an essential relationship. You know, the artisan and the apprentice. It's such a base level natural human experience for an older practitioner or the wise sage or more knowledgeable person to hand down this knowledge to someone just looking up the mountain from the base. You understand?
Sure, and I think it's a really organic kind of way in which knowledge is passed on.
Right.
Absolutely.
We don't learn everything from mum and dad.
Yeah.
One thing that I would say about a mentor-mentee relationship, it should never be someone, because I think we go through our lives and sometimes we're motivated by love and lust and relationships, and a mentor-mentee relationship should never be a romantically inclined relationship.
Sure.
Because I think what can happen is that someone that you look up to and you're seeking advice from, and that you're having you can cut this out completely. You can leave it in the film.
No, I want to do.
But that you're having a romantic relationship with, that you're involved with it more than on a human level, on a spiritual friendship level.
Yep.
I think when you have this, and then when this perhaps breaks up, when you don't see this mentor anymore, then I think whatever you've been learning can be completely devalued, and you can actually feel like you're devalued as a person, as in your whatever you've been learning from this person, any kind of progress you've made.
You retreat from it?
I think you can feel like it never had any value, and you can retreat from it. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
That's really my only advice for seeking out unofficial or organic mentors, but don't be in love with them. I think you have a responsibility as a mentor, especially to someone that's younger than you. There's definitely a unwritten, or in some of the programs I'm sure it's actually written, but there's a responsibility to care and not have your own interests in mind when you're helping to guide someone. I think that's really important.
Yeah, sure.
Right, you shouldn't be intimidated. Why should we feel intimidated? You know?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
When it comes to university or getting involved in politics or whatever it is, or choosing a career that you don't think that you can do, like, don't be intimidated, just go to show up. And that kind of that feeling of a story, that seed of an idea. It might not be an idea for a story, a fictional story, whatever it is. It might be an idea for a perspective in an essay, whatever it is. But I like what Isabel Allende said about that seed of coming from a very somber and secret place where we don't have access to yet. I like this idea that it's there and you can feel it. It is something, she said, it is something that I've been feeling but which has no shape, no name, no tone, no voice. I think that's something to, like, if you can find that in your teenage years, and it took me dropping out of high school and living in a tent for a year around Australia, like all around the desert, across the Nullarbor, hitchhiking, worrying my parents sick, going to India, working in a car wash, riding a motorbike up and down Vietnam, having boyfriends from England to Brisbane, to finally, like, listen and just stop and listen and find. And I mean, I was doing it all in this process as well, and making these mistakes and going which ways. But when you get it, when you go that secret and very somber place, that you know, and when you can connect it to an activity, to a decision, to a process, to a year, to 4 years, then stick with it. It's right. If I can grab time in the morning, then that's when I'm writing. If I can grab time at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's when I'm writing. If it's at night or if it's in the day, whenever it is, whenever the opportunity presents itself, you have to grab it, whatever your circumstances are. And a circumstance of having a small child, or living in a city where it's noisy, or living right next to a construction site where there's jackhammers all day long, or whatever that circumstances, when the opportunity comes to do what you need to do, what you know to do, what you can feel to do, what is required to do. Sometimes you just got to do the hard work, you know. But you have to do it. Grab the opportunity when it presents itself, because art is long, life is short. So I wrote down, how do you know what you are looking to discover, what you are looking for? The imaginative arousal that makes you begin working in the first place on a particular topic or an avenue. Once aroused, your imagination is on a search. You need to believe that it has been aroused by something real, and that something is bigger, much bigger than the perplexing fragment you start out with in your imagination, waiting to be found, and the whole thing dug out like a dinosaur bone. Stephen King said, The writer's job is to get as much of each one out of the ground as intact as possible. Sometimes it's a small fossil, a seashell, sometimes it's enormous T-Rex. Either way, the techniques of excavation remain the same.
I think it's really important to tell people again, and to be straight with people. Like I tried to be straight with people doing the master classes last year. I'm not going to talk to your mum and dad. I'm not going to. This is not about that environment. This is about the environment that you want to create.
Yeah, it's such an important time.
You know, and I think just the idea that research can take you to Africa, can take you to India. And normally people think of these things in terms of hard science most of the time, because they're, going out to research something. But realistically, all of those things become a process of research.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
Completely. I really heard that there was more than 100 different types of tofu in China. I'm a vegetarian.
Wow. Yeah.
And so when Little was a baby, we went to China for 4 months and just travelled. It differs from region to region. We just travelled around eating tofu, and she was 10 months old, so she's just starting on solids. And so that was 4 months, and my research was my seed for something else. And it's similar to we're here in France, but there's surely over 100 different types of cheeses, in the local supermarket on the corner. And I don't know, there's something there, there's a connection there. Between tofu and cheese, and it'll join up to something else. There's a couple of seeds there for some harvest in years to come, but it's there, and it was worth it. And I wouldn't change. I wouldn't change listening and experiencing and just being a student of the world, especially writers and their process of. Building on that seed, or getting to that seed, or accessing that place, because I think at different points in our lives we can feel like there's a blockage to that place, and I think a lot of people go through this, and writers definitely go through it, and I've gone through it numerous times. It's called writer's block. But I think some people, especially artistic people, can be inclined to use drugs or alcohol as an avenue, to get through the blockage and to access that place. Florence Welsh, a young singer from London, I saw an interview with her recently, and she talked about how she loves to write music with a hangover, and I know that feeling. And for a few years I did the same thing. I loved writing with that little tinge of a hangover, because I was thin-skinned enough and I was just sad enough that I could function beautifully, so I thought, but I could drop below the skin and really I could reach down and put my fingers into that place and reach for that seed and have access to that sort of level of emotion. And I think this is a dangerous sort of little habit to work with. Just as I said, it's important to take the opportunity to work if there's noise outside, if you're in the middle of a house full of brothers and siblings running around and there's so much distraction. It's important to learn to steady the pen, to stay centered, to find that truth and that seed, and to work through the process and get the work done sober or straight, without having to use a crutch, because that crutch can easily turn the doorknob, open the door to a flood of completely losing your mind, of being addicted, of losing any opportunity that you might have created for yourself previously. So that's really important. It's just important to be able to work under circumstances with outside influences, but to not poison your mind, and your clear insight is so important as well.